of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does anybody on the board have any public comment this evening?
I just wanted to mention that the Lions Club pancake breakfast has been canceled for tomorrow morning. They were really uncertain about the weather and the ice and didn't want people out there slipping and falling.
I think that is a great idea.
And just a reminder that on this coming Saturday is a fundraiser at the United Parish Andrew Hall for the family on Mulpus Road who were burned out of their house.
Do you have the time?
I don't.
Okay.
It's the evening, though.
Mr. Toll, anything?
Nothing.
Okay. Two announcements. The continuing announcement that the Lunenburg Gift Mart Committee is still in the middle of their 6th annual Gift Mart Drive and is being held in mid-December by invitation only through the Lunenburg Food Pantry and local churches. Donations of unwrapped gifts are displayed for folks to, quote, shop for their families, and supplies are limited. Last year, Gift Mart helped 80-plus Lunenburg families, and the hope is to help more this year. To do this, we need your help. There will be gift collection boxes around town, at the Lunenburg Public Library, and various businesses. Please help by donating new unwrapped gifts or warm clothing by December 10th, or mail monetary donations to Nancy Kirillo at 12 Whitetail Crossing, Lunenburg, Mass. 01462. All checks should be made out to Gift Mart. And of course, they thank everybody who has already donated for their support. They say they helped 80-plus people last year. I just found out yesterday that there were already 102 families signed up this year. And secondly, just a reminder from the Boys and Girls Club that their annual pledge drive is still ongoing, and their drive goal is $15,000, and they are currently at just over $12,000 after last night's tabulation. So they'd like to reach their goal by December 31st. You can, of course, donate online at bgcluboflunenburg.org, or you can drop a check to them, made out to the Boys and Girls Club of Lunenburg, and send it to the Teen Center at 15 Memorial Drive right here in town. Any public comment from the public? Okay, so we have two things are already here. So let's just take interview and appointment. Cullen Dwyer for the Historical Commission. So if you would come to the front here, and as is our custom, if you would introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Historical Commission.
My name is Cullen Dwyer, and I'm a new resident in Lunenburg. I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, where my mother served on various committees for town planning for many years. I've lived in New Mexico for most of my life, but recently moved back to Massachusetts to be closer to family.
Welcome back.
Thank you. And I'm working at Wachusett Brewing Company, and Lunenburg seemed like a natural choice. I was attracted to this town because of its charming historical and typically New England character, and I'm concerned with conserving that.
Excellent. You have met with the Historical Commission already?
I have.
And you have talked with their members and know the roles and responsibilities of that commission?
I do.
Okay. And is somebody here from the Historical Commission?
Emery Phelps is here.
You would come up forward. I just want to ask if you have taken if the commission has taken a vote.
Oh yeah, we interviewed him, brought him on. He's been to 3 of our meetings to determine whether or not he really would feel that he could be a big part of our group. And we voted that we really would like to have him, and he's accepted. So if you accept him, we'll appreciate it.
I would open it up to the board. If anybody has any questions for Mr. Dwyer, if you would stay at the mic, please.
Have you served on any committees before anywhere, and an understanding of how meetings work, Robert's Rules of Order, things like that?
The only other committee I've ever served on is for the Brewers Guild in New Mexico, where I served as a treasurer. and certainly the rules of order I'm familiar with through my Masonic Lodge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? If I may ask, so do you have a historical background, or just any, what is your interest? Only because that was one of the opening questions. Why the Historical Commission?
I think especially because I'm living in a historic house on Main Street, and because of my family's background and connection to that. And that's very much, for me, it's my connection to New England.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I would entertain a motion on the appointment of Mr. Cullen Dwyer to the Historical Commission, given the recommendation also of the current members of the Historical Commission.
I would move that we appoint Cullen Dwyer to the Historical Commission.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just noting that were no other applicants for the position. That's
correct.
That's correct. There was one who also met with the Historical Commission, and my understanding is he withdrew or advised the commission that he was not interested.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, all those in favor of the appointment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Welcome to the Historical Commission. And yes, I will. So you will see the town clerk to be sworn in at your earliest convenience, and hopefully before your next meeting. So thank you. Okay, we're going to jump down to under town manager reports. We have a request to begin road acceptance process for Whitetail Crossing and schedule a public hearing date, as noted here, January 13th, 2015, and then refer to the planning board for a report per Mass General Law, Chapter 41. So I would ask the town manager to.
I'm not sure what else, what else I will say. This is an item that has been outstanding for a period of time. We have had an engineer's report of the road. You might recall this is something that was potentially up for consideration at annual town meeting, and it didn't make it onto that warrant. The road is still, or the developer is still waiting for the road to be accepted. The engineer's report shows that the work is substantially complete, and it's at a point now where you can schedule the public hearing and then send it to the planning board for the planning board report. So I have suggested, as the chair mentioned, that you schedule the public hearing date on January 13th. The land use director said 3 to 4 weeks is the time frame that the planning board would need, so that the 13th would be really the earliest that you could schedule that public hearing.
Any questions from the board? And all the documentation is now set for this, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. So then I would entertain a motion that we schedule a public hearing concerning the road acceptance of Whitetail Crossing for January 13th, 2015.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It is scheduled. Mr. Bernie.
Just to note, you should also formally refer it to the planning board for their report, because you can't hold the layout hearing without the planning board's report. So just as a matter of order, it's just a formal part of the process.
Okay, so will somebody who made the motion amend the motion? Or we will revisit the motion, I guess, since we've already voted on it.
It can be a separate motion.
We can redo the motion. It's perfectly fine.
I would be happy to amend the motion or redo the motion to include passing it on to the planning
Refer
board.
to the planning board
Refer
report.
to the planning board.
Yeah.
And I would second that additional.
Okay. All those in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Did we do it right? Okay. Okay, so review and the approval of calendar year 2015 business licenses and alcoholic beverage licenses. One we all look forward to every year.
So, what I would like to do, just for the record, is to read the list of licenses to be approved by category. And there is a list for you to follow along in your packet. The first group of licenses are common victualler, all alcohol. We are allowed 14 by state law. There's one remaining. I'll make those points because people often inquire about what we have left for licenses. So this evening, before you have licenses for American Graffiti, Asian Imperial Incorporated, The Bootlegger, Donnelly's Tavern Incorporated, Red Pepper Incorporated, Seaflon Inc., which is Sean Patrick's, B&H Corporation, Melendez Mangana, and KJ Waterfront. We have noted, you'll see, we've made notes for establishments that open that you've already approved at 10 o'clock open on Sundays, and that would be KJ Waterfront, Embers Pizzeria. All taxes, fees, any fees or taxes associated with these licenses either are paid or there is a payment plan in process. We only have one establishment that has a payment plan, and that is the Lakeview Club. Everything else is paid in full.
Do you want us to take these one at a time and approve
Yeah,
them?
why don't we do that?
So if somebody would be the official motion maker, entertain a motion on the common victualler all alcoholic licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved on that one.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
And the next is general on-premises all alcohol. Lakeview Club, J.K. Waterfront on the Rocks, Donald E. Lyons doing business as Settlers Pub, and MLMR Inc. doing business as Prime Time Pub.
I'd entertain a motion on those licenses, general all on-premise all alcoholic as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None. I'm not going to ask for discussion after each one. If somebody has an objection or a question, please say so.
The only question I have is general on-premise versus common victualler. What's the difference?
Food, probably.
Food, it does have to do with,
Common victualler
Food.
is food and alcohol, whereas the other ones are like
It can be
bars
just,
or pubs.
okay.
Pubs. Yeah.
Thank you.
and then the next common victualler wine and malt and common victualler wine, malt, and cordials. We have 5 that are allowed by law, 3 remaining. For wine and malt, PP Group LLC doing business as Bangkok Hill, and for wine, malt, and cordials, Kebabalicious.
Oh, okay, that's why the 3, okay. I would entertain a motion for common victualler wine and malt and common victualler wine and malt and cordials as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Just a question, if I might. The 3 remaining, are they just wine and malt, or could they be
They
cordials?
could be
They
cordials.
could
Okay.
be either.
Those
Thank
are-
you.
Those together are 5.
Okay, thank you.
Next is retail package store, all alcohol. We have 3 that we are allowed by law, 0 remaining. Victory Distributors LLD doing business as Hannaford Food and Drug, Vasta Inc., and Elena's Gourmet Grocery.
Entertain a motion on the retail package store all alcoholic as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Next is retail package store wine and malt, 5 allowed, 0 remaining. Baker's Whalum Variety, Ole Ahad doing business as Hadwin Market, Genghis Inc. doing business as Center Pizza and Variety, Central Mass Garden Center, and Honey Farms.
Entertain a motion with retail package store wine and malt as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. This makes for really boring TV, by the way.
And then common victualler licenses, Donnelly's Tavern, Inc., Lakeview Club, Todd Jennison doing business as American Graffiti, Conrad's, Baker's, Whalum Variety, Stella's Coffee Shop, Lunenburg Exxon, The Lunchbox, Victory Distributors doing business as Hannaford Food and Drug, Lanny Orchards, White Farm Ltd. doing business as Cherry Hill Ice Cream, Bootleggers, J&D Enterprises doing business as Shady Point Beach and Campground, Genghis Inc. doing business as Center Pizza and Variety, Ole Ahad doing business as Headwind Park Market, Presto Pizza, C. Flan Limited doing business as Sean Patrick's, Red Pepper Inc. doing business as Ixtapa Cantina, Asian Imperial Garden, JK Waterfront doing business as On the Rocks, The Village Grill, B&H Corporation doing business as Mickey Shays, Melendez Magana Inc. doing business as Dario's, The Ugly Omelet, Global Montello Group doing business as Mr. Mike's, Scott T. Lowe doing business as Scott's Dogs, Bangkok Hill, Settlers Pub, Dunkin' Donuts, Honey Farms, Kebabalicious, Dippin' Donuts, KJ Waterfront Inc. doing business as Ember's Pizzeria.
Entertain a motion on the common victual licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Automatic amusement devices, American Graffiti, Donnelly's Tavern, Lakeview Club, Baker's Whalum Variety, JK Waterfront doing business as On the Rocks, Whalum Gas, B&H Corporation doing business as Mickey Shays, MLMR Inc. doing business as Prime Time Pub.
I entertain a motion on automatic amusement devices as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
And I'll make a note that video and CD rentals, that license is not being renewed. It is, there are outstanding fees and/or application with that particular business. Weekday entertainment license, Donnelly's Tavern, Inc., Black Horse 2, Inc., RG Scooters. Todd Jennison doing business as American Graffiti, B&H Corporation doing business as Mickey Shays, The Bootlegger Restaurant, MLMR Inc., doing business as Prime Time Pub.
Entertain a motion on the weekday entertainment licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None.
Base license, Lakeview Golf Driving Range.
Entertain a motion on the base license as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Class 1 motor vehicle license, Chapdelaine Truck Center, Inc., Colonial Imports West, Inc., doing businesses North End Mazda, Colonial Imports, Inc., doing businesses North End Subaru, Joe Smalley Auto Sales, Inc., doing business as Daewoo North, Central Mass Motorcycle, doing business as Recreational Dimensions.
Entertain a motion on the motor vehicle licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Class 2 motor vehicle license, Ralph Troggett, doing business as Mass Ave Motors, Roland L. Trank, doing business as Roland's Towing, Baker Enterprises, doing business as the Auto Barn, Henry and Carol Baker, doing business as Baker Towing, Robert C. and Michael R. Lovewell, doing business as RC Motors, Colonial Imports, Inc., Peter M. Kelly, doing business as PMK Motor Sales, John V. Gogan, doing business as JG Service, Brian R. Pomerlow, doing business as P&S Truck and Parts, Inc., Custom Auto Sales and Storage, and then Double Down Sales, Inc., doing business as import domestic auto sales. That one was originally marked in your packet as being incomplete, but it is complete at this point.
So I entertain a motion on the Class 2 motor vehicle licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Please.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Class 3 motor vehicle license, Michael R. Chapdelaine doing business as Chapdelaine Auto Salvage, Pomerlow doing business as P&S Truck and Parts, Inc.
Entertain a motion on Class 3 motor vehicle licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Limousine licenses, First Choice Limousine and Transportation Service.
Entertain a motion on limousine licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Peddlers licenses, Scott T. Lowe, Stephen Gravel, Daniel E. Patton.
And entertain a motion on peddlers licenses as read by the town manager.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. All right, so don't leave before we have the signing party at the end. Okay. A review and comments and endorsement of the draft housing production plan.
So this document was distributed to you several weeks ago. I mentioned to you at your meeting last week that we would be looking for any comments that you had relative to this plan at this meeting so that we can complete this document. There is a request that the Board of Selectmen endorse the document. Our Land Use Director, Adam Burney, is here this evening and can either kind of give you a brief summary about why we should have this document, what's contained in it, or just accept comments. Selectwoman Bertram is not here. She does have some comments, which I need to go over to the printer to.
Well, I'm sure I have comments.
Okay.
So I'll open it up to the board if anybody has comments.
Just two comments. One is just, since this is in draft, the tables are not yet numbered, and I'm assuming those will be updated at that point. The secondly, I was at the planning board meeting when this was originally presented to the board by the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, and the note of future housing production schedule, which is on page 46 of it, includes possible development of units at Hollis Hills development, and I'm just noting that that's still subject to legal proceedings. I think it's appropriate to be included in the inventory. It just, depending on the outcome of that, the legal proceedings, that may change. And I think the other thing that noted at that point was that if all of those developments went through and existing housing increased the way it was expected to, that by 2019, we may be able to meet the 10% requirement of affordable housing, which has always been our goal in this housing production plan anyways. The question becomes how we do it is what we would like to do, is what has been termed friendly 40Bs, and it'd be nice to get into that realm instead of the unfriendly ones. Those are the only comments I have.
The only comment I had was one that I see Mrs. Bertram already had, and at the risk of bringing up painful memories, it was the reconsideration of the Community Preservation Act. Not only are they wrong that we haven't brought it up, we brought it up twice, and it passed town meeting twice and failed at the ballot twice. Other than that, I was fine with the document. You have in hand, you said, Mrs. Bertram's comments, okay? Anybody else on the board?
I'm fine with the document. I do note the, some of the suggestions with reuse of municipal buildings for housing, and certainly that's one of the possibilities that the Building Reuse Committee would look at. But at this point, none of the things that had originally been planned or discussed are believed to be on track.
I think some of Mrs. Bertram's comments or suggestions are really in progress, so I think that,
Right.
you know, consulting with the Building Reuse Committee is something that's ongoing, and we've talked about, she's just formalizing it here. And the second, her point number 7, has to do with current zoning bylaws, where it is suggested in this plan that a bylaw be adopted that would require all new developments incorporate an affordable housing component similar to the existing bylaw that requires a housing development containing 10 or more units set aside 10% for moderate or low-income housing. So, I don't know, aside from new developments that request that 10%, I don't know exactly what she's representing there. I mean, I know we have that on the books already. So that would at least allow us, once we reach the 10%, that's not have some large development take us out of 10%. I don't know what other bylaws would be considered in this case.
Well, what I can say is there is language in the protective bylaw that does allude to that. And I don't know if Mr. Ebersol will recall that there was a discussion about that at the meeting when this was originally presented in draft form to the planning board. And there was some concern that it may not have been equitably applied in the past, and there may be some loopholes in the way that people present developments to the board that sort of let them skirt that inclusionary aspect. The inclusion in the plan is more, in the housing production plan, is more of a just verify that what you have is adequate, and if not, look to reshape it to do exactly what you mentioned. You know, once we hit the target goal, maintenance, continue to get that 10% every time we're adding units so that we don't at some point end up with more 40Bs. And you know, the point is well taken on Hollis Hills and the litigation. Even without those, I think the town is able to meet their production goals for the 5 years. Currently, it's a goal of 20 units per year. With the projects that are currently approved or on the precipice of being approved, we shouldn't have a problem having 20 units produced annually. I know Tri-Town has 2 or 3 buildings left to build at 33 units a building. One which they're in the process of pulling permits for to be built in the coming year. So they'll build that and have occupancy within a year, so we'll get our first year under our belt. We can apply for, everybody uses a different term. I think safe harbor was the last term I heard somebody in town use. Essentially, it's compliance with the housing production plan. We've made our goal for the first year, and it staves off the ability of someone to come and jam a 40B down the town's throat for a 12-month period. So that will give the town a little bit of breathing room. If we're able to get 40 units built in the first year, it becomes a 2-year moratorium. So then we get more into some of the friendly 40Bs, and we can say, you know, we don't really think that that's an appropriate project, and we're not going to let you do that. So that's the ultimate benefit of a plan like this.
Well, if there are loopholes in that people are skirting, then I would urge change of the language to prevent that if we can.
You know, and that's tertiary information on my part. I don't know that there's actually loopholes or whether it was just an incomplete or uneven application of the bylaw, or just a different interpretation. So as I dig further into the bylaws, it's something I'll be discussing with the building inspector. And
yeah, it's the intent that's important. I mean,
correct.
Again, for the same reasons we won't review here again. We want to stay, once we get there, we want to stay at or above the 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can just accept this with the comments and forward this to the planning board, right? I mean, we don't need to yet again have this come back to us.
Well, I guess I would look to Adam for guidance on that.
I mean, I guess ultimately it's up to you. You don't have to. If you're going to support the plan, I think even with Mrs. Bertram's comments, there isn't a substantive change to what the plan will be. I do have a more complete draft that's 102 pages now, has chart numbers, has page numbers, all of that. I got that about a week ago from MRPC, and it includes comments from the state, which were more clarification comments. and it gets it to the point where incorporating your comments to address the issues that the board has, the planning board has already issued their comments, so it'll be wrapped up. Both the planning board and the board of selectmen will support it. The town manager will submit it to the state, and within 90 days, we'll have an approval.
So, okay, I don't know that that offered me the guidance I was looking for. Do you need us to vote on it tonight?
I do.
or
Well,
not?
I need you to vote on it. Whether you do it tonight, I don't know if you meet on Christmas Eve, or
No.
Wow, Christmas Eve. I just like my mind exploded. Christmas Eve. No, we're not meeting that week of Christmas.
are you meeting? So you can vote on it
Next
now.
meeting
You
would
can vote
be-
on your next meeting. That's wholly up to
The
you.
next meeting is not until after next week.
Not
Our
until
next
after
meeting
the
is not
new
until
year.
the new year.
Then it would be my desire to have support prior to the new year.
Okay, that's guidance.
I understand if the board is uncomfortable doing that without a finalized
Well, I
plan.
don't know. I'm going to open it up to the board if they're uncomfortable. I think the one person who may be uncomfortable isn't here and gave us a 2-page list of comments. But if the rest of the board is confident in that, then I think that would speak to me.
I would make a motion that we endorse the draft housing plan with the understanding that the comments raised tonight and through Mrs. Bertram's comments be incorporated and addressed in the draft, as well as the state's comments.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. And if you could get us
Thank you.
that latest
Yeah, I'll
in
send you the-
electronic, only electronic form.
I didn't want
I
to
have now 3
confuse the
packets
issue.
of these.
Yeah, I know. I'll send you the. I didn't want to confuse the issue of the draft plan that you had because the pagination is different, and I know when I'm working with multiple drafts, I get confused, so I don't like to try and do that to other people.
Right. Well, usually when we do all multiple drafts, I like to see the markups so that I know what's changed, so I don't have to review every single page again. But if I get any
Unfortunately, I
more-
didn't get a track change copy.
Okay, well, in the future, that would be helpful.
When I do it, I do that, but this was a document generated
By-
offsite.
right, I understand. If I got any more copies of this, I was going to be having them as stocking stuffers soon.
You know, start building some houses with
You
it.
might have to buy a bird just so you can use them up in the cage.
There you go. Okay,
Thank you.
general discussion of gravel permit process.
Okay, so Adam posed an interesting question to me this afternoon, asking what the difference between items 3 and 4 were, and for some reason, when I put the agenda together last week, there seemed to be quite a difference, which I couldn't
Okay,
explain.
as chair's prerogative, let's join the gravel permit process with the earth removal
Because sometimes
Earth
we're...
removal,
Oh, right.
Earth removal squared bylaw.
That's right. There's some earth that's not gravel.
So included in your packet is, from your policies and procedures, earth removal permits, which really just refers back to the bylaw. There is a copy of the bylaw. There is a copy of our office procedure. There's a copy of a list of the outstanding earth removal permits or the issued earth removal permits. A copy of both the original application that one would fill out to apply for a permit and the renewal form. When we go through the permit renewal process in July or August, probably August, as a part of the process, we send our building inspector, zoning officer out to inspect each of the sites, and he makes notes. And I know specifically, when we did this just a few months ago, you had asked some questions relative to some of the ones that there didn't seem to be any activity. Should we be pursuing closure plans? Why do people keep this open? And then we also had the discussion maybe some months before that about the Elmwood Road subdivision, and we kind of it kind of came to the forefront that you probably should have a discussion about this, because should a permit be required for a subdivision that's doing something, removing earth to that extent? So I asked Adam to come here this evening to try to, to present this, try to get some feedback, with the thought that maybe as soon as next month we could sit down in a workshop and hammer this out. But he needs to hear directly from you what your concerns are, either tonight or within the next couple of weeks, so we can prepare for
Well, that's,
that.
if anybody has any issues tonight, I can tell you that when this was brought to my attention through one of Mrs. Bertram's planning board updates, as we pass out her comments, I was actually surprised. I mean, I guess there would have to be, I need an explanation, and I'm open to hear the explanation about why a subdivision who was going to remove a certain particular volume of gravel that would generally fall under the earth removal bylaw, why a subdivision would be exempt without having to come to the Board of Selectmen. Maybe there is a reason. I'd like to know what it is. And that's the only discussion I have, is it seems to me on its face that it should come to the Board of Selectmen if such a request is being made.
Section 9, subsection 12, exemptions, specifically the grading or development or any approved subdivision or public way is specifically exempted from.
No, I know it is.
Oh, why is that?
I want to know why the exemption exists. I know there is an exemption.
I generally, and this is not, many towns have earth removal bylaws. I think that, I have to imagine that central Massachusetts was some sort of earth gold mine back in the 50s, because most of these date back to the 50s and 60s, and they're generally include exemptions for anything that's permitted by any other board. And so that leads me to believe that in general the intent of an earth removal bylaw, without doing some massive zoning general bylaw history lesson, is for a site that is specifically removing earth as an industry, not as incidental to additional development, because that would generally result in there being no review. If I decided I had, black gold and I want to start selling my topsoil, there's no permit that would cover that outside of earth removal. So I could be out there digging it up every day, shipping off tons and tons of dirt with no regard for what's happening to my neighbors. When you get into something like a subdivision, a development plan review, a special permit, a building permit, all of those have some recourse and standard inspection. There's a review of pre and post construction finalization. In the realm of development plan review and subdivision, there's generally an erosion and sedimentation control plan to ensure that there isn't an impact on public ways and adjacent properties. So for those reasons, it's kind of like double jeopardy to throw the earth removal in there, because the planning board can look at it and say, this E&S looks great, I understand what you're doing, you have to bring it down because the public way is here, and in order for you to bring the road in, have it get to the point where you're ending it and meet the grade requirements of the finished road, you have to remove X number of cubic yards of material. And then once you do that, the surrounding area, you need to be able to build houses that have reasonable driveways that don't require massive retaining walls. So you're bringing that down, and then you're getting into a case where you have a significant amount of fill that's removed for a variety of reasons. And it goes through a fairly extensive review process. And I think that the logic behind it is to put somebody through a double review process, you're duplicating an effort. And I was actually quite surprised that the earth removal bylaw falls under the Board of Selectmen in Lunenburg. In looking at, I think I pulled out Shirley, Lancaster, Townsend, and Westminster. I believe all of them, if not the majority of them, have a special permit process through either the zoning board or the planning board, which is where many earth removal bylaws reside. Because again, it's a land development process that is something, not that a Board of Selectmen can't do it, but it is generally in the wheelhouse of a land use board. Whether it's, whether you want to keep it out of the planning board and give it to the zoning board as sort of a balance, or whether the idea is the planning board already deals with these plans, engineers, that kind of stuff. So let's give it to them because they should be used to looking at this. And again, I don't know that I've seen one that doesn't exempt subdivision ways and general subdivision construction based on the review that they get for that under the general laws.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons why this came up is that the Elmwood Road property was such a large deposit of gravel, and that there may be other developments in town. I'm not sure if the one off of Howard Street is subject to gravel removal. I'm not sure. I don't think it is. So I think there was just the concern that this subdivision was going beyond just making the property set up for a subdivision, which is the assumption there'd be. And so the planning board cooperated with the Board of Selectmen and incorporated some of these terms in there. So I think that as long as we knew that there was something addressing that issue for subdivision in the subdivision control regs, because it seemed like at the time that came up, it was, no, the building inspectors stated that this was not subject to it, so therefore there was not going to be any regulations. Once there was communication with the Board of Selectmen, the planning board came up with appropriate regulations that related it, not to prohibit it, but just to make sure that there was, as the bylaw says, would not endanger the general health, excess noise or traffic hazard and things like that. So I think the concern was on the implementation of it within the subdivision control, and it may have been during transition of, the planning director, the land use director may have been part of that process too. So I share Mr. Alonso's concern and Mrs. Bertram's concern that this is not in some regulation, whether it's the gravel removal or whether it's in the subdivision rules and regs that then refers back saying it's there. And I guess I'd be interested in having a workshop on this generally as this intersects with stormwater. So it's and that again turns into land use. So if we can be guiding body as opposed to ones that are going to do it, a lot of things were in the Board of Selectmen's duties because of the history.
And I do understand that.
And who had enough time to do what. And I think it was also just who was going to do the banner. I think that the other comments that Mrs. Bertram talks about is that there is a requirement in our bylaw to have a registered engineer talk about the closure plan and operations. What's the story within active? So I think we need to review the bylaw too, which we had that as one of the items that may go to town meeting. So
yeah, one of the things, if I may, just to come back to this, I appreciate your explanation, and I fully accept the explanation that certainly I don't want to impose on a developer going to multiple boards. My interest doesn't lie in the authority of who has the ability to issue an earth removal permit. My only concern is that earth permit removal permits that are issued by this board as a standalone process versus one that would be a part of a subdivision process, that the protections of the neighbors and the environment around it are equivalent. So I think in that workshop, what I'd like to see is that we put something here and equally in either by reference or in its entirety in the planning board review that says if there's an earth removal permit that's going to be requested because of the project, that it meets the same requirements that we would do if somebody wanted to go in just to remove the earth permit. Now, I understand that if you're doing a development, there is no closure plan. The closure plan is that you finish your houses and you grow a lot of grass and everybody lives there.
Sure.
All right, so you don't need a closure plan,
Well,
but
you have a
protections
closure
about
plan.
hours of operation, about erosion, about dust, all of these things, whether they come to this board as a separate entity, as a business of earth removal, or doing a subdivision, should be the same, so that the residents and the outlying areas or the neighboring areas are protected from this. That's all.
And I'll address a couple of those comments. I'll start with you since you just finished, Mr. Alonso. I think that the bylaw could use some work, and I think this ties back into Mr. Ebersol. So if we look at the bylaw, I think that what we can do, and I think what a lot of other communities do, is outline what the conditions, the standard conditions operational hours, protections, buffers, E&S, all of that, outline that in the bylaw, and then allow the board, whichever board it is that is issuing the permit, to add additional conditions as necessary. And those items that are exempt from the permitting process, but are subject to the conditions outlined in the bylaw. And I think that that's the way a lot of places do it. And it puts it in writing somewhere, and it isn't, trying to get two boards to kind of line up. You have the one earth removal, and everybody's subject to it, and it all ties back together. It's just a matter of whether or not you're going through this process or the other process, and just having to add those additional conditions in. Mr. Ebersol brought up the stormwater, and I think that earth removal there's no way it's not tied to stormwater. And I think it's multi-pronged because it affects stormwater. You have to have erosion and sedimentation control, whoever's permitting it. But at the same time, I know the Conservation Commission is looking at working on a stormwater bylaw to make us compliant with the MS4 permit and the new MS4 permit that's coming out. And generally, those include some requirement for permitting over a certain square footage of disturbance. Usually it's somewhere in the ballpark of an acre. That's the standard EPA general permit requirement. So that would also have some stormwater implications, which would lead to erosion and sedimentation control, which can ultimately tie back into the earth removal. So you're kind of attacking the same problem from a couple of different angles, and you have that looked at in a variety of different ways. So I think that there's some efforts ongoing, and I think that now is the right time to sort of address all of this while everybody else is working on it. Make sure that whatever language and requirements are going into one are referenced or at least tied back to the other. So I think that there's a lot of, I don't want to say ease in putting this together, but it's nice that everything is in flux as opposed to having one thing that you want to change and then having to look at everything else and see where it's going to go. So I can reach out to the Conservation Commission and let them know that this is being discussed and that it may have an effect on the bylaw that they're putting together, and perhaps they would send a representative to sit in and join the workshop and sort of see how the two can be cooperative as regulations.
Sounds great.
I think the other thing to note too is that if you're talking about the 50s and 60s for gravel removal, the Wetlands Act came in the early 70s, so it was sort of a precursor to that for protection of the land, yet not stopping people from being able to actually remove the earth.
Well, I'm glad to hear you reiterate exactly what I think that we're looking for. Certainly, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but certainly what Ms. Bertram's looking for, what I'm looking for, what Mr. Ebersol is looking for. I don't know if the other members.
Earth removal should be regulated.
Right, and it should be consistent. So whoever the permitting body is, it should just be consistent.
I agree.
Anybody have anything further on this? Mr. Proctor, I was wondering, I thought we were just entertaining you.
I just had a quick question about the bylaw, and I'm hoping you can answer it for me.
First, just say who you are.
I'm sorry, Dan Proctor, 1529 Mass Ave. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember years ago reading it. Isn't it that anything over 10 yards, technically, if there's not a permit on that site, requires an earth removal permit?
That's correct.
Right.
Which is really kind of crazy. I mean, if you call me up and you say, I got a little mound in my backyard and I want to level it to put in a kid's swing set, and I go in there and I remove, 20 yards to level it for a swing set, does that mean that the town wants me to come in front of the board to get a gravel removal or an earth removal permit?
Well, as
Because
somebody,
that's not a
I hear you,
permitted.
and as somebody in the industry, I would look to you to say, okay, what really consists or comprises a commercial venture? What should that number be?
Right, exactly, and that's what I'm saying, 10 yards is pretty minimal.
Right, I agree.
I mean, obviously, if we're digging a swimming pool, then we have a permit from the building department to put in a swimming pool. If we're putting in a septic system, we have a permit from the Board of Health to do a septic system, so that is exempt from the earth removal process, but I just always thought that 10 yards was pretty minimal.
It sounds to me pretty low.
That's
That's one
nothing, really. I mean,
one or two
Six-wheel
trucks,
dump
right?
truck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we should look at that, and I agree.
Right, it should,
So if you were digging a foundation for a house, sort of an average size house, how many yards would you remove for that?
30 by 50 house would be 10 yards by 16 yards, 160 times 8 foot deep would be, 3 yards, so you'd be like 500 yards. But typically, if you dig a foundation, you leave the material on site because you use that as grading. But again, you would have a permit, so it wouldn't require an earth removal permit because you'd already have a permit from the building inspector.
No, I was just trying to get.
Yeah, but typically, I mean, if you did, that's what a foundation would, consist of.
500.
But typically, when you dig foundations, usually, most of the material is left on site. Not always, but.
I think we should look at the entire bylaw, including that component, and
I've always thought that is a really low arbitrary number.
Yeah, it's pretty, I mean, 100 yards would probably be a more realistic number as far as
course,
from a
it's-
contractor standpoint, so that I'm not technically in front of the board
Right.
4 times a week to say I want to remove 10 yards.
and again, it's going
From
to
your
depend,
house.
it's going to depend on,
In full of permit.
How did my house come into this?
that's right. It's going to depend on the size of the lot and where it's located, too. So I think that may have been why they did the 10 acres, 10 cubic yards
So
at that
it would be a
point.
proportion of the lot.
Right. So I'd be interested to see what other towns, how they handle it, and then we look at the entire
Right.
bylaw. And
I mean, you wouldn't want somebody who's on a quarter acre or half acre plot all of a sudden decide, I want to make a sledding hill in my backyard and dig this huge trench. I mean, you wouldn't want that either.
Right, no, I understand, exactly.
But I mean, but I still, 10 yards is nothing. You could rake out 10 yards and not even make a dent in anything.
That's right, it's not a large amount.
And you
certainly.
see some communities do a 3-tier. There's the exempt, there's the permit from the code enforcement officer, and then there's the full public hearing permit.
Right.
So, if it's, maybe it's up to 10 yards or up to 50 yards is no permit, 50 to 500 is a permit from the code enforcement officer with stipulations, and then anything over 500 requires the earth removal. And I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah, well, I would look for input from a lot of the excavators in town because they deal with this, so I think it'd be good input.
Yeah, if you have a number that's really, doesn't make sense, people will ignore it.
Well, I mean,
Exactly.
they would never ignore. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this or discussion on this subject?
I guess just as an action item, not that we need to decide tonight, and I know the land use director has a lot of more and more things being put on your list, and as far as the various items that we ought to think about shorter than later, one of the things we talked about was the requiring a gravel removal permit for a subdivision. And the question is, that seemed to be the thing that we were most concerned with for the first thing to be able to deal with, and whether that would be included in the subdivision rules and regs, or whether we would change the bylaw here. We just need to have a time when we're going to come back and talk about this again, and whether that's a workshop.
Yeah, we definitely want to have the
Yeah,
workshop,
yeah.
and I think that's where it all gets done. Absolutely.
And I'll say, I think that it's potentially realistic to have this on a town meeting in the spring, mostly because it's a general bylaw, so you avoid the public hearing process. And if everybody is in agreement on the general outline of what's going to go into the bylaw, writing it is, I don't want to say it's easy or quick, but that's, this information is out there. We're not going to recreate the wheel. We're going to use examples and pieces from other bylaws. So putting it together to have it ready for a warrant opening and a warrant printing shouldn't be problematic, as long as there isn't a big contention about it. And I think it sounds, again, from my perspective from the outside, it's more housekeeping and just buttoning up the issue, as opposed to there's a big contention about how it's going to work.
Right.
The only thing that we had also talked about that we would talk about in a workshop is the concept of a closure plan. Because we have a lot of long-term ones, and a bylaw says the selectmen may. And in many cases, we should,
Sure.
not just may. And the question is, when is it appropriate to have a closure plan when you've got a big operation? So I'm not the expert on that, and so we may do a 2-tier
Sure.
quick fix in for the May and then something else, but I think if we do a workshop in January or February, that would give us enough time to do things.
And I, what I'll say to that is I think that the decision on when a closure plan happens may not come into a bylaw. It may be more of a board policy, whether written or stated. And then, you can kind of decide how, if you have it tiered, if you have it time, if you have it, volume, however you choose to do it. But I think that's something we can certainly discuss at the workshop.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Minutes. Warrants. Payroll deduction. Good night, Dan. Payroll deduction, $157,200.95. And accounts payable in the amount of $248,207.21. Action file issues. Committee reports, Board of Health,
No report?
Building Reuse,
No report.
Capital Planning,
Met this evening, just before this meeting, did our first pass on priorities. We'll continue to work on that. One follow-up item with the requests relative to asbestos at the Turkey Hill Middle School, which we're going to do a little more research on.
excellent. Finance Committee,
They are meeting this coming Thursday, and their meet and greet candidates are the land use group and the DPW.
Library Board of Trustees,
Meets next week.
MPO and Planning Board, Ms. Bertram is out.
MPO's meeting tomorrow, and she's going to go to that meeting.
Thank you. PAC,
Is meeting Monday, the 15th.
okay. School Committee,
The school committee met last Wednesday. Steve Malandrinos presented a technology budget that was level funded for the next fiscal year. But then they did a presentation on options for the school's plan to achieve technology device for every student in grades 10 through 12 with the opening of the new school. There were several options, and each option includes an additional $55,000 for an extra IT personnel. One case it's two people, but in every case it's at least one person. In the first option, the district provides $46K for netbooks for grade 10. The school building fund provides $92K for device purchase for grades 11 and 12. There's a possible tech fee of up to $50 a student. If they impose that, the district cost would be reduced to $31,500, and the school building project cost to $63,000 to get everybody with a netbook the first year. A mandatory $30 insurance fee is going to be charged to every student. The second option was to charge each student $400, and they buy the mandated device, 10, 11, and 12, plus the $30 for insurance. There would be an initial cost from the building fund of up to $49K because students who have free and reduced lunch or an IEP have to receive them for free, and so that adds up. And every year after that, there would be about $18K incurred as each new grade level came up. Then there's option C is bring your own device. That would cost $60,000 to get the system in place, $6,000 in additional cost annually, and then that's where the other $55K comes in for an additional IT person. So now it's $110 in personnel in the bring your own device form. And I'm assuming there's going to be that $49K for the free and reduced lunch at the beginning and $18K annually for that same expense. If you go back to option A, upon graduation, you've got a lot of netbooks that are just 1 year old, so that becomes your backup inventory, and they go down to lower grades for making the mobile carts and things. So they'll pretty much use those. The second year, they'll do kind of the same thing. but the third year, they assume that the netbooks have like a 3-year lifespan. So by the third year, maybe the kids buy them, maybe they get recycled, you know, who knows what happens to the netbooks when they're used for 3 years. Steve Maladrino sent me a copy of his like 10-year plan that I can send you all. And in the 10-year plan, he doesn't ever carve out or mention what's coming out of the school building fund. So that's a little confusing. But there's an assumption that money's coming out of the school building fund for the netbooks. So next, they're going to refine and detail the plan, identify potential cost savings in paper, etc. Paper must be expensive. And they're going to have to do additions to policies and curriculum concerning internet safety and instruction. And if they use the bring your own device version, there's a lot of internet safety issues that have to be resolved. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I just have one, which is, I mean, as I'm hearing this, I'm just thinking, they want, all those options have to do with mandating a digital device for each student from 10 to 12, is that it?
Yes, netbooks.
Okay.
They know that they have to sell this, but this is just their sort of, you know, they're in not
So that's
bringing it out.
5, let's say, that's 360 combined, approximately, 120 people per class. And I guess, I don't want to, I'll ask the question anyway because it's in my head, so just like, and the purpose of it is?
You know, they haven't really defined the goal.
Okay.
That's a nagging question for me too. Like, how does, you know, what are the benefits? They think it'll save you money in textbooks and some other things.
Okay.
Most colleges are starting to go to require that all homework assignments are sent out by the instructors to the professors electronically, communication back and forth. They learn online, other things like that. So, and I know that that's been talked about at the schools across Massachusetts, and I believe that there was a question of whether there might be some state funding for grants and other discussions on that. And I'm assuming this hasn't come to the capital planning committee yet. So this really is early in the discussion, so I think that it's open for good comments and discussions.
Mm-hmm. And budgets were also presented by the principals of the 3 schools. The primary school requested a 55% increase in their budget. Part of it looks really large because every year they present budgets and they're slashed. So if they present sort of the same kind of budget, it seems like a really big increase because it's an increase over what they actually got, not what they requested. And the middle school is asking for increases in textbooks, as well as 2 new sections for grades 4 and 6, because those classes sizes are slated to be at 27, 28 students per class, and they're looking to make it down 21, 22. And they are looking for a full-time paraprofessional for before and after school tutoring. The high school, oh geez, I missed that. Let's see, I forget what the high school wants another 62,000, and geez, I don't have that written down. I forget what it was that they were looking for. They were looking for $47,000 in textbooks for a world history course for 8th and 9th graders, and so that was like the biggest part of the increase. So that's all on the budget. The school calendar committee came up with a pretty creative and educationally sound approach aimed to improve the consecutive days of time on learning and eliminating some of the choppiness in the schedule, and to complete the 15-16 school year earlier than usual, so they have a longer summer for the transition. And I thought it was pretty creative. but the discussions are ongoing. This was just first, the calendar committee is sort of parents and school committee members, and then there's a faculty committee, and then they all have to hash it out with the school committee. I mean, one of the ideas that I really liked was like there were 3 professional development days, and put a couple before school starts and the other one after school ends, so you're not breaking up the kids' weeks and their learning for those days. And they actually were talking about taking the February vacation and just making it Monday, Tuesday off, and have 3 days, so it isn't a whole week off in February. So again, to try to get them out by maybe the end of the second week in June, so you got a longer summer. And the next school committee is next week.
Excellent. School Building Committee meets tomorrow, 6:30 at the Passios Building. And one thing that is clearly obvious, if anybody has driven by there, is that the steel right on time has been delivered and is starting to be constructed. So some of the steel girders and columns have already been erected, and that will continue, through the winter, weather permitting, and everything is right on schedule and right on budget thus far, so that's good. Sewer Commission.
Is meeting tonight?
Excellent. Town Manager reports.
The only thing I have to mention is it is my intent to present the 5-year financial forecast at your meeting next week. And the Finance Committee is aware of that, so as long as you don't have an issue with that, we've kind of gone back and forth on whether it's a Thursday night at a Finance Committee meeting or sometimes it's been Tuesday, but based on your schedule, it looked like we had a good chunk of time to do it Tuesday, and I know sometimes it's difficult for you to attend Thursday meetings. I know a couple of people have conflicts, so if it is okay with you, my plan is to present that next Tuesday.
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Appoint Treasurer Collector.
That I'm going to ask you to continue to next week.
Consider it continued.
But it will be ready for action next week.
Okay. Okay, and that is the agenda. We already had an executive session prior to the opening of this meeting at 6. And we are having a meeting. This is our last meeting of the year next Tuesday, barring any emergency. So with that, I would ask if there's any final public comment from the board.
One additional item for people that have been following the pipeline discussion. Kinder Morgan is currently talking about moving the pipeline in our area into New Hampshire to follow their utility easements that go east to west. However, there still is the lateral that would come south through Townsend and Lunenburg. And so we still need to see where that potential pipeline will go through and connect to the substation at Pleasant Street.
Lucky us. Any other comment from the board? Any public comment from the public? Okay, I entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone. See you next week.